Morning. This is the regularly scheduled meeting of the Board of Fire Commissioners. The date is December 16th, and the time is about 9:10 a.m. Roll call.
Ibarra.
Here.
Glazier.
Here.
Fazio.
Here.
Hara.
Here.
Woods Gray.
Here.
Fire Chief Terrazas.
Here.
In place of Assistant City Attorney De La Guerra. You have a quorum.
Okay. Absolute moment of silence.
Please remain standing for a moment of silence in honor of past and present members of the Los Angeles Fire Department who spoke their lives in protection of our community. Thank you.
All right, so we start with Commissioner comments.
I just wanted to had a nice visit at Fire Station 76, and thanks to the crew there for hosting me.
First of all, before I forget, I'd like to wish everyone a happy holiday because this is our last meeting before the holiday. Of course, it's next week. And for some, it's tonight. So I wish everybody a happy Hanukkah and a Merry Christmas and be safe. I did attend the orientation last night, which I forgot last time, and I questioned Andrew, so this time I paid closer attention. I was impressed. Except I do have to state that I'm not really happy with the way this lottery thing is going because we still don't have very many African Americans in this pool. And we have one more woman, which is kind of good. But the chief says that there might be a possibility there'll be others. But anyway, I still think we may need to look at this process or investigate it more because some people said it wouldn't work, and it's not working, it doesn't seem. So that is my concern. And then I just really like to compliment, and as usual, our fire department is so wonderful because as I watched them fight these battles here recently, you could see the tremendous amount of stress and strain that must have been on their bodies while they fought these big fights. And we had so many fires here recently, look like in the last we used to talk about medical rescue, but now it's like we have fires that are really just breaking out all over the place. One of the things that concerned me, and I don't know that it was true, but the media reported that when we had the big fire downtown, we had so many people on the large apartment building that was unfinished. When the other fire broke out, we had to seek mutual aid. I don't know if that was true, but I was concerned about that because I did hear that. The media did say that. And that, of course, goes to the fact that perhaps we don't have enough firefighters or that we need to work more on ensuring, building up, restoring our department. But that was a concern of mine that I heard on the news. And, I get most of my information from the news, so I have to rely on that.
Let me respond to both the issues. The class we did last night, we're not done yet. We're going to be adding additional recruits, 10 to 15 more, hopefully by the start of December 29th. With regard to mutual aid, at the peak of both fires, I directed our dispatch to activate our mutual aid agreement with our Area A cities, and they provided a couple engines. We regularly return resources when they ask for it, and when we're stretched, I'm not going to hesitate to ask for help as well. So that did occur.
Well, I was glad that they were there to assist us, but I was also concerned that we had two major fires going and we weren't able to cover them, it seems.
We were able to cover the fires. The Area A companies went to vacated fire stations that weren't near the fire.
So we could have covered the fires, but we would have had vacant stations.
Correct.
So we still don't have enough people. I guess that's what
more is always better. Yes.
My big thing was that if we had a real crisis, and just recently we're beginning to see this happen because it didn't happen before, that this cut and the shortage is really a real problem for our cities, the safety of the city and the safety of the citizens. Because as I always said about the fire department, it's like insurance. You can't get it when you need it. You got to have it ready when it has to go. so it did kind of demonstrate to me more so the real need to have more resources, and I hope that the city council and the mayor and all have been apprised of this so that, they can, I know the mayor is doing all he can to try to help us, and we still have a big problem financially in the city, but he is really working to help us. But we do see that we have this real serious issue here, and so those are some of the issues that I had concerns about this past. I did go to the toy party too. It was really fun. That was a beautiful event the fire department put on with at the exchange, and I assume they collected some great toys because it was a beautiful event with great food and great company. We had people from everywhere. I met some people that were not fire department people who just came and said, "Oh, they have this every year." I said, "Yes, they do. I think it's the best unpublicized event in the city." It was beautiful. And then I got to experience the expensive valet parking in L.A. City. Boy, that's an issue. But so that was a great event, and I know that the children and the parents and the people in the city appreciate the work that the fire department is doing along with Channel 7, even though the rain interfered with some of the toy collecting this week. I think they've probably been able to make it up. And again, thanks to the department for all the work that they do. It's tremendous.
I also, along with a couple of our other commissioners, attended yesterday's event, the orientation. Great event. I thought that it looked like an outstanding pool of candidates. I was particularly impressed with how nicely everybody comported themselves, and they were all dressed well, and they just, looked like they were the kinds of people that you'd really want to see, as part of our fire family and part of our city. So good luck to all of those 34 at least, and coming soon, hopefully, for another 10 or 15. Again, kudos to the fire department for, no serious injuries sustained for some major fires. Just shows our training, our professionalism, our ability to get out there and take control of situations that are once every, 10 or 15 years kind of fires like that, if not longer. And yet, we're ready, we're on the job, and we're there, and we're saving the ability for that thing to have spread. It could have been really catastrophic. And kudos to Chief Castro. There were probably other chiefs that were out there in front of the media as well, but particularly noticed him addressing the media, and it was articulate, and it was, just, really well stated. I know you don't have a lot of time, and you're under pressure, and you're also commanding a lot of people, and yet you were able to communicate the information beautifully for anybody listening to really understand what was happening. And also to our, our arson unit now, who's tasked with the responsibility of helping to figure out, how this occurred, and if they find that it was man-made, then to prosecute those guys, because that's an awful event. So that's it for my comments.
Thank you. Okay, so that's Commissioner comments. Item 2A is announcements and meetings, and I don't think we have any, right? So let's go to 2B, significant incidents and activities. Chief Castro.
Commissioner, may I go over my events?
Oh, yeah.
Real briefly, December 3rd, we held the holiday press conference at Frank Hodgman Memorial Training Center. That's where we partner with LA County Fire Department, and we demonstrate how fast a Christmas tree can burn unless you keep it moist. We had a good media turnout for that. The following day, December 4th, I spoke to the firefighter class staff at our training center to give them some guidance on my expectations in dealing with our new recruits. That same day, we had a fire stat meeting where we covered the shops, MFC, and the Fire Prevention Bureau. Had very good discussion and dialogue about performance metrics. That evening, was the evening of the Sparkle Up Toy Drive at the Exchange, and that was a great event, and that's an annual event. And we raised thousands of dollars, and we get hundreds of toys. So that's a very successful event. December 5th, we attended the UFLAC holiday celebration at the UFLAC offices. December 7th, we participated in the 34th annual Spirit of San Pedro holiday parade in San Pedro, my home community. December 8th was our big fire, the Da Vinci fire. We had a press conference there on Fremont and Temple at 4:30 or 5 a.m. in the morning. That same day, later that day, we attended the Mayor's Press Conference on Earthquake Resiliency with Dr. Lucy Jones in the Mayor's Press Room. That was very well attended by the media, and I think it's an outstanding step forward in earthquake preparedness. December 10th, I attended a City Council presentation to recognize the LAFD Sparkle Up Toy Drive at Council Chambers with Channel 7. Later that day, immediately following, we had another press conference announcing that the ATF investigators were arriving on scene at our Da Vinci fire. Immediately following that, we went to the Central City Association. We have a cabinet meeting with developers that meet us for lunch about quarterly, and we discussed many future partnerships moving forward. I thought that was excellent. We're going to continue to do that. December 11th, I held an all-chiefs meeting at our training center. We used to do that on a regular basis about 8 years ago. We're going to return to doing that. I think electronic communication is good, but in-person communication is better as an adjunct, not to replace, but as an adjunct so we can have two-way conversation real time. December 13th, I attended the Pacoima Holiday Parade with you, Commissioner Ibarra. That was a great time. Thank you for attending with us. A little cold out there in Pacoima. And then later that evening, I attended the Battalion 6 Holiday Dinner on the USS Iowa. That was a unique venue to have a Christmas party. Great event there. Following day, December 14th, I attended the Wilmington Holiday Parade in Wilmington, my other old hometown. Very successful parade. Had over 100 entrants. Thousands of people lined the streets. December 15th, we attended, that was yesterday morning, the Stuff a Bus event in the Westfield Topanga Mall in the Granada Hills area of the valley. That was very cold there as well, but I'll tell you, there was a lot of interest, a lot of toys were collected. The goal was to break 8 buses worth of toys, and we filled 10.5 buses of toys. So it was a very successful event. And last night, we attended the Firefighter Family Orientation at our training center. It was an excellent event. Chief Rideout and his staff and Chief Palacios did a great job of hosting that event. That concludes my report.
Thank you. Okay, so we move on to significant incidents and activities. 2B.
Hey, good morning, Madam President, Commissioners, Council, Leticia. The following represent our emergency incidents since the last meeting, and we'll begin with the 12/8/14. The fire at official address was 499 North Fremont, and it was the large condo under construction fire. Ultimately, we had first on scene resource about 2 minutes and 25 seconds from dispatch. Ultimately, 62 fire companies would participate, 11 rescues, 3 EMS ambulances, 6 battalion chiefs under the initial command of Battalion 1, Battalion Chief David Perez, which transitioned into the incident commander of South Division, Mark Storms, and then ultimately to myself as the DDC. I'd like to defer some pictures to kind of add some color to the narrative and the efforts. Before I begin it, it's kind of funny. I was accused. Commissioner Fazio brought up the media coverage, which is obviously substantial, and I remarked that it was my experience and impression that we were probably the only fire department in the country that could have extinguished the fire. Our members extinguished the fire to the level of efficiency that I witnessed that night. And I got a call from some friends I've had over the years the luxury of teaching all across the country various command and control elements of firefighting. And I was accused by more than one of my colleagues or friends of, in the last 3 months, uttering those same words, the Wharf Fire and the Venice Fire. And you brought up, I think, a great point that we've had 3 fires that would perhaps be considered career fires on their own right since September, and that probably the majority of a lot of our members, they might identify 30 years later as this being the most significant incident they ever responded to. And truly each one represented extreme challenges to the mission-level firefighter as far as needing physical strength, fortitude, stamina, courage. All of the tenets of tactical firefighting were exemplified by those mission worker firefighters to a level, even with somebody with a 36-year filter like I have, of seeing, and by and large being impressed with our members for my whole career. These 3 stand out incredibly in terms of their dedication and service to the city. So I'll begin with these pictures. The first one represents the overview of a distant picture, and it's a dramatic picture with the city skyline and and really the size and complexity of this fire that we had. And the first arriving units, really it's a nightmare to pull right out of quarters and see a fire of this magnitude right around corner. Usually we like about 3 or 4 minute response time to wake up. And the first arriving captain did a remarkable job, I think, of determining the scope and complexity and ordering the appropriate additional resources. But this is essentially what he was confronted with. Another picture in the early stages of the fire just shows a little bit about what those first resources were confronted with. And this type of fire under construction, I drive by this building every day coming to work. And truthfully, the Battalion 1 companies had prepared, they had pre-fire planned, and they had a plan in mind of how to deal with this, where to locate the command posts, where to get the water supply, all of the exposures, which proved to be true. But nevertheless, when you have a fire like this, it's in perfect alignment to burn it in a radical manner. You had the lumber that was stacked up. It was nailed together. There's a natural wind tunnel that shoots through this area. It wasn't sheeted with drywall or any fire separation. So everything lent itself to exactly what we saw. But their perseverance in preparing resulted largely in that initial effort being hugely successful. The next picture kind of depicts the freeway scene. And I actually drove right by this at about that stage. And when I drove by it, I saw there were companies up on the freeway, and that was one of the best vantage points to attack the fire. Nevertheless, the problem with any freeway is there's no hydrant. There's no water supply up there. And it's one of the things I wanted to remark on. From the command standpoint, it's relatively easy to develop an objective to establish a water supply. And we have a functional group of people that we designate to accomplish that. Your water supply group, get water to the freeway. It's easy to say, and it's incredibly difficult to accomplish. And this was one of the areas of excellence. And by the time the fire was essentially under control, and I walked up to the freeway, and I saw the job they did of getting water supply with those 3.5-inch lines from various sources on the flatland up and over onto the freeway was nothing short of miraculous. And it was hugely successful and responsible for us getting a large amount of water on there. The freeway involvement was significant. We've all driven by there and have probably remarked about how close that building was to the freeway. And the signs ultimately melted and fell down. We had to shut the freeway down for both directions, both north and south. The 110 and the transition to the 5, or the 101, had to be shut down. And that became one of our recovery objectives, is to get that open as soon as possible in preparation for the morning commute. The next picture just shows another shot of the members on the freeway with the water supply, allowing that unique perspective and position to attack the fire. The next, if you could hold up that previous one more time. The other thing, probably the big dilemma here, was this initial fire, which had limited fuel, and we knew that it runs out of fuel. But when I arrived on scene about 20 minutes after the initial dispatch, we had several dilemmas. One of the biggest and most profound were the exposures. The one was the 201 FIG, which all the windows were blown out. We had air support. We had our Air Force on scene, a helicopter reporting active fire on several floors of this high-rise building. We had the county building, which was an exposure. The other part of the Da Vinci complex that was stuccoed across the street was literally smoking with heat, radiated heat. And really, this is how a conflagration starts. This is how smaller departments, with the inability to mobilize 300 people on the scene within 20 minutes, like we were able to do, aren't able to get a hold of this, and you have it go from building to building, and that's how conflagration starts. This particular building, where we had multiple fires, the windows were broken out, I had limited resources to establish 7 hand lines on 14 floors. And that is so above the norm of any expectation of hand line. Usually it's a couple companies for one hand line. And we had really 3 companies establish 7 hand lines, and there were just a multitude of examples of performance above and beyond. I asked the captain, I took a couple council people through and showed them the fire involvement that was extinguished right inside a lot of these units before it got bigger. And one of the captains, I said, how did you guys do this? I don't see a line. He goes, guy held up a trash can. A firefighter held up a trash can underneath a sprinkler head and got enough water to extinguish the fire. So there were just multiple examples of ingenuity and steadfast to extinguish it. The other thing I wanted to comment was this incident really represented a new phase in the recovery part. After the fire was out, we have embraced as an organization the need to assist the citizens long after the initial flames are extinguished. This was the aftermath. Final extinguishment, cause determination is continuing as we go, but we actually established an incident management team to come in and manage the recovery effort. Both of those buildings had literally hundreds and hundreds of people that needed to get data off their computers, needed to secure sensitive files, as we could all appreciate being dumped from your office space, perhaps for a prolonged period of time. The initial blush was the building management wanted to not allow anybody in. And at that point, under the direction of the fire chief, we assigned it to an incident management team. We developed objectives, and I want to read a little bit of the synopsis of the following week in terms of the LAFD's participation, along with other city family members, in the aftermath of the fire. Again, it was an incident management team. We assigned logisticians. We assigned a delegation of authority that was issued to the IC that removed a lot of barriers and red tape that allowed us to get things done, that allowed us to escort people up into the structure. 9 city departments and a multitude of public entities were affected by these 2 buildings not being able to let anybody in. Over 600 city employees were affected by this. We had a 5-day operation, over 1,000 hours of dedicated service by LAFD members. They established an incident command post in front. People would come up. They would be greeted by an LAFD member. They would be given a safety briefing. They would then be escorted up, and because the building was still unsafe, we had water, we had glass, we had high-rise building without windows. So there was a safety element that was considered and compensated for. We utilized LAFD cadets, our Explorer program, to assist us in that process. No major disruption in city operations. There was no loss of power. There was some issues about shutting down the power because of various issues regarding the fire. And the deal brokered by the incident commander to allow the servers to have limited power just got kudos from one of the business people who said if his servers go down, he loses about $400,000 worth of revenue every single day. And the first blush by the building was to listen to the electrical contractors to shut it down. And having this process, this cyclical process of management, allowed in us coming to the best informed decisions about how to take care of the citizens. And again, we stayed on scene for really another 5 full days as the custodian of that planning process and recovery process. And I really believe that the efforts that were produced in that, and there was some learning, we all learned a little bit, will become the blueprint for future recovery efforts, especially when we go down to the 4 bureau system and have the resilience officer assigned to those 4 bureaus. So I think it was a big success. Again, the fire cause determination is still ongoing. We requested the services of a national response team from the ATF, and they are working with our arson investigators, LA County arson investigators, federal employees to determine the cause, and that is still ongoing right now. So that represents the end of that. Ironically,
can we have a couple
absolutely.
of questions about it?
Well, first and foremost, Chief, I mean, again, remarkable job for leadership, management, and line firefighters and engineers and paramedics. So a miraculous job. Thanks to all the city for what it is they did. Where my mind went after this was our codes and our ordinances relative to buildings that close to such a major artery. And I actually contacted the fire marshal and asked him a little bit about what is the code, and sort of identified that maybe there's a need for us to review the ordinances in the city with respect to how we want for things to be built as close as this is being built, to such a major artery. Because if we had a few things going on, maybe some sort of terrorist event or arson event, it would really shut us down. But aside from that, just for the health and the benefit of the city, maybe there's something that we should review here. And I don't know if that's an ongoing effort. But I would like to know more about what we might consider as a change in our fire code to implement something whether they're fire walls in front of these buildings or, something,
The
setbacks,
An incident of this magnitude generates discussion amongst all the bureaus, and Chief Idovich and the Fire Prevention Bureau have been active participants in the recovery phase and subsequent discussions along those lines also. So I'm sure that we'll visit that concept and under Chief Idovich's leadership determine the best
So
course.
can we have some sort of an overview of what might be some options or some further discussion? Can we agendize it for a upcoming commission meeting to look at what it is that we could do to strengthen our ordinances?
I think that would be something we'll certainly do. We'll get with Chief Idovich and we'll put it on the agenda and respond back.
I even think about these buildings being built so close to freeways in terms of human health. There's so many cars going down that artery all day long with a building that close, with the windows being that close for kids or what have you to be in those buildings. Is this the smartest way for us to be, dealing with the urban planning, if you will?
It's been a controversial development, as is really any large development in the city. The Playa Vista one is another example that's in that same framing stage right now, and is probably 3 times as big as this. Okay. I think any big development, just from a political standpoint, has a little bit of controversy, but from a public safety standpoint, we can certainly visit that.
Okay.
When you do the follow-up on this report, can we find out if anything that happened with that particular fire led to you thinking of changing the policy for the fire department? Or was the equipment appropriate? I heard some firefighters talking about the heat. An overview of what changes that fire might have indicated for us. And I agree. Every time I turn that corner at that freeway, I say, who put this building on the freeway? And when they get ready to rebuild it, will there be consideration given, as you said, to whether or not they build it right back up to the freeway or if they have to redesign that particular structure?
Well, I think the fire prevention code thing is a separate entity. From a tactical perspective, every significant incident, we have an in-depth post-incident analysis where we build initially an F-13, which is an analysis of emergency operations. We publish that on the portal. That'll go out this week. And we have a more significant analysis of the operation. And to be quite honest, there aren't too many large fires we have this big and this significant with no injuries and really such a successful conclusion. I've been going over some of the individual letters written by officers, and all I really come up with is great work with an exclamation point. There may be a few tactical things we'll address, but by and large, I view it from a tactical perspective by those firefighters, those first arriving, and for that 3-hour firefight, a truly incredible job. But we do an in-depth analysis at all significant.
I agree with you. I thought it was a phenomenal job that was done with the kind of heat and the things that were going on there, and also the fact that there's some water on the freeway and how you get around there and try to put the fire out. And I have to compliment on the pictures. While the pictures are not supposed to be pretty, they were beautiful pictures of that fire.
Yeah, who took the pictures?
The pictures are beautiful.
There are a variety of sources that there's one that a woman took from the distant perspective, and I actually saw the actual fire, not the smoke loom up, from the transition of the 405 South to the 110 North, and I'm thinking, boy, this is going to be one of the most photographed fires in our history because it was a clear night, an exterior fire, and it burned for 3 hours. And so there's a variety of news sources, LAFD photographers. I almost ran over a stringer photographer on the freeway that had parked and was running across the freeway. So it was. We will have a full PowerPoint presentation similar to the one we did the wharf by the end of the week also.
And I think when they build those buildings, they should think about that, the fact that firefighters have to get around those buildings. They should allow for that, to have space for them to adequately get around to protect them and for the firefighters' safety.
The problem is in that framing stage. It's a relatively short time span, but in that time span, everybody is very vulnerable because of the
and I think that the city should not let them rebuild that building the way it was.
Yes, ma'am?
Oh, no. I was just wondering if you have more other incidents?
Yes, I do. I'll go over.
Sorry, if I could just briefly, I just want to acknowledge the fact that this was a cooperative. Our fire department did an amazing job, but we also had some amazing cooperation from DWP and DOT and CHP and LAPD and others. And so I just quickly want to recognize the cooperative effort that we were able to lead and bring all those multi-agencies together, because I think that also was really a model of cooperation.
Without question, and that is without question, sir, will be the blueprint for those 4 bureaus for the recovery phase. The city family, our relationships over the last 5-6 years are at an all-time high, and the effort was a result of those relationships. That same evening, I'm sorry, did you have something?
No, I just said great job on that one.
Okay. At 4:09 hours the same evening, prior to us officially declaring knockdown, we had another fire at 2871 West 7th Street. That was a major emergency in its own right. It obviously received a little bit of lower billing because of this significant incident downtown, but we had 18 fire companies under the direction of the North Division Commander, Chief Ernst, who came all the way from 88s to command that. It was first units reported a 2-story commercial building under renovation with fire through the roof. Initially, they took an offensive approach. Ultimately, were moved out to a defensive approach. Knockdown time was about an hour and 50 minutes. We did receive a call from Metro Fire Dispatch at some point in that to the ICP that we had 18 fire stations that were vacant because of all of the resources at both of these fires. And that resulted, as Chief Terrazas elaborated on, the utilization of Area A resources to backfill a few of our stations. Finally, on the 12th, we had our first significant rain event, really our second one, but our first significant one. We all know, and typically we wait to christen the end of brush season when we get about 2 inches of rain before the new year. And with this dump, we have a little over 2.5 inches of rain in the city, so we are gratefully, because of the moisture levels in the hills, declaring an end to the brush season. The contract for our air support, the contract Erickson's will, at the end of the month, subside. On that day, we have a series of calculations that take place to determine rainflow, to determine swift water deployment, augmented resources. And they reached that level. We deployed 2 swiftwater teams in the evening and 3 for the next day. And the next day, on the 12th at 09:41, we did have resources respond to 2 people in the Los Angeles River. They were people that were living in one of the islands that exist when the flow was not substantial. And they performed a land-based rescue utilizing air resources to successfully rescue those people without incident or injury.
Just one other quick comment, I think, on the fact that we had, the 2 simultaneous incidents. I think it really goes to the span of control issue that we have with our current setup of North Division and South Division, and just really, I think, lends some support to the move that we're making to that 4-bureau plan. Because with the 4 bureaus in that situation, we would have had folks on call coming in, and we wouldn't have had, command vacancies across the city, I believe.
Well, I agree with you that it does support the contention of 2 24-hour assistant chiefs. Even though we would have the bureau commanders on call, probably at a remote location, at their home, and dependent upon where they live and where that geographic bureau, we had the division commander from North Division get on scene in about 11 minutes after dispatch for that second fire. If we didn't have the 24-hour division response, the time to have that executive level oversight would have been significantly greater. So it was a big benefit to have, and we just happened to have a lot of. We had 3 deputy chiefs on scene at the Fremont fire, which assisted also. But the ability to have the second 24-hour response AC proved very beneficial, and we've always maintained that we're okay for that first big one, but when the second big one hits, we could potentially be a little longer.
In the future, we'd be able to call in additional executive level. Correct?
Yes, but with albeit a longer response.
Sure, but we get, that just helps us backfill a little quicker.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Chief, when was the last time that we solicited mutual aid from other agencies?
It's been a while. We, obviously because of our size, we give more help than we receive. But I know that the big brush fire that we had up in Bell Canyon, the Topanga Canyon fire, we had substantial resources come into the city to help, both backfill stations and help at the incident.
So that was when?
It predates my time up here as the deputy chief, so I'm not sure if
So like in the last year, before then.
Historically, we did the first interstate fire, we did the civil unrest, we did the library fire. It is a very rare occurrence. In my 31 years, I'm aware of about 4 or 5 times. And I'm sure there's a few more that I'm not aware of.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
We don't usually have public comment after significant incidents, but since we did have a substantial discussion, I'll just give you, Mr. Lima, are you still here? So I'll just, if we can make a short comment. Since we did have a substantial discussion.
Thank you, Madam President. Normally don't speak after this, but Frank Lima, President of the Firefighters Union. And I agree wholeheartedly with what Chief Castro said, and just want to publicly, say that our firefighters, paramedics, our dispatchers, our pilots, our inspectors, our arson investigators, everybody that was called upon did a great job, even our emergency incident technicians, along with our battalion and command staff. Just one of the things I wanted to point out, it was brought up, and I'm glad it was brought up, but it wasn't followed through on, was there was 18 fire station districts, no coverage. Just want to remind this board that in 2001, 18 suppression companies were permanently cut from existence in our fire department, which means we would have been in a situation where we could have had everything covered. Seven truck companies, 11 engine companies were cut. And like Chief Terraza said, civil unrest, certain big things where we required Area A to come in. I believe in the last less than a year we've had it happen at least 3 times. Small brush fires in the 405 pass and things like that. So it's becoming a more common occurrence. Thank you.
Thank you. So moving on to 2B2, which is the verbal report by the medical director relative to medical emergencies.
Good morning, Madam President, Commissioners. I'm Greg Rayner. I'm Chief Terrazas from the EMS Division. Dr. Eckstein's at the hospital today. He'll be in the office later this afternoon, here to provide you your verbal report for significant medical emergencies. The morning of December 9th, Department Resources in Fire Station 79th District responded to a multi-casualty traffic accident involving a Torrance Transit bus and an automobile. Firefighters and paramedics evaluated 16 bus passengers and the driver of the automobile, ultimately transported 5 patients to a hospital. Later that morning on December 9th, we actually responded to LAX to a fairly unique incident and responded to an inbound airplane passenger in active childbirth. On the plane's arrival at the gate, our members boarded the plane and rendered immediate medical attention to the mother and newborn infant. The patients were then transported to a local hospital in good condition. The incident received attention from local media. On the morning of December 10th, Resources in Fire Station 77th District responded to a reported explosion involving a commercial water heater. Apparently, during a relighting process, 3 persons that were involved in that process were actually injured and burned. Firefighters and paramedics evaluated and treated the patients for their injuries and transported patients to 2 local hospitals. And then finally, on the evening of December 13th, Battalion 13 Resources responded to a reported multiple victim shooting in Fire Station 66th District. Firefighters and paramedics provided treatment to 3 victims that had received multiple gunshot wounds and transported those patients to 2 local area trauma centers.
Thank you. And I don't believe we have any presentations, right? No? So moving on to consent agenda items. Just one item.
Move the consent, item 4A, move the recommendation, receive and file.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
So moving on to item 5A is the report by the department on the status and disposition of LAFD matters considered and referred to committee.
Good morning, Madam President, Commissioners, Chief Terrazas, City Attorney, and Ms. Gomez. Chief Everett, Chief of Staff, with the update from Council and committees. In your packet, there were several activities that went on. I can answer any questions about those, mostly related to grant transfers for different USAR, hazmat, and other funding needs there. There are some other activities that are not in your packet from different committees. The Budget and Finance Committee on December 8th adopted the second FSR, the Financial Status Report, and that'll be moving over to Council. The Innovation, Technology, General Services Committee on December 9th had a few items. The first was a request, a motion that was filed by Councilmember LaBonge to determine the feasibility of a new Fire Station 76 in the Cahuenga Pass area. So the department will be reporting back that in about 60 days or so. In addition to that, there was an oral report given on the fire that Chief Castro just described, more on a GSD focus and on the recovery focus that GSD and some of the other city departments had to endure because they were occupants in 221 FIG. In City Council, on December 12th, there was a special committee meeting on our vehicle management system, which was adopted by the council, and that's going to assist our fleet management quite a bit in addition with other departments. And also on December 12th, the Public Safety Committee had several events. One of them, Chief Rueda was part of, where they reported back on a pipeline rupture in San Fernando Road back in May of 2014. And so there's just a report back on that incident. And that concludes my report.
Just a quick question. Could we add to our future agenda a discussion of our facilities plan as far as what our long-term, our current building happening and what our long-term building plans are?
Yes, sir.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. 5B. Oh, we need to.
Sorry.
Motion receive and file.
All in favor? Aye. So 5B is verbal update by the department relative to fire stats.
Good morning, Madam President, Commission, Chief Terrazas, Counselor. Battalion Chief Al Poyer with Fire Stat Section, providing you an update today. As you know, we've talked about the emergency operations entities within the organization have been fire statted. Deputy Chief Joe Castro and Chief Deputy Mario Rueda have been intimately involved in the process in supporting what Chief Terrazas' vision on fire stat. They've been embracing the concept, but we've moved on to the administrative operations portions of the fire department, and I wanted to mention that the other members of the senior leadership team, including Chief Deputy Mathis, Chief Vidovich, Chief Palacios, and Chief Rideout, and Phil Flegel, future members of the senior leadership team, have also been intimately involved in the ongoing process. We had a meeting on December the 4th where we fire stat inspected the Fire Prevention Bureau, Metro Fire, and the Supply and Maintenance Division. As Chief Terrazas mentioned, a very successful meeting. We've also had the initial discussions with our Training Division, Disaster Preparedness, and Professional Standards Division, where we'll look at the internal affairs processes of the department. The tiered dispatch system was implemented in late November. We expect that the component of call processing time to really reduce that amount of time. We're pretty optimistic about that. In the last week of November, that was implemented. We did gather some data related to that, but we won't see the true numbers until we go through the entire month of November with that process. We validated a lot of the numbers for the November. That data should be published this week. On the public-facing document, there was an additional validation process because we switched over to that tiered dispatch system. The fire stat process, the whole metric-driven leadership process, is going to be further incorporated into our culture through implementation in the strategic plan. We've worked real hard to incorporate that entire process into the strategic plan. In the future, we envision having metric teams of our analysts and our fire stat members and additional members go out to the different bureaus, divisions, and sections within the fire department to assist them in developing metrics and to incorporate that into all of our processes, budget processes, and resource deployment processes as well. First generation of a dashboard, which is the electronic dashboard, the ability to have real-time information available to all of our resources. We're developing the first generation of that right now with Palantir Technologies. We have another meeting scheduled this afternoon to go over the next iteration of that, but we're working towards developing that for our emergency operation resources. When we have the 4-bureau concept implemented, it gives the ability of those officers out in those different geographic areas to look at their information from their resources in real time. The CIO position is a key component to this process. One of the things we've experienced in each of our meetings is that there's technology challenges and technology solutions that need to be implemented, and that CIO is going to really help us look at what we need to do to institutionalize all those processes. Again, everybody in this process has been very engaged. The dialogue's been very fruitful. We've identified a lot of gaps, and we've also identified some best practices. The 2015 schedule is near finalization. We expect to get the final sign-off on that and publish that in the near future. Do you have any questions?
Yeah.
Hi there. You know, one of the biggest benefits I see of the FireStat process is trends and trend analysis. So when can we start to hear from you as far as what are the trends we're seeing out there, and you know, what are we learning along the way, and then what are the things that we're acting upon?
Well, that's a broad question, and I do understand the question. We establish a baseline and a framework, and that's really in the first iteration of this process, especially in the administrative operations components, as to what is our framework, what is our baseline, what is the data telling us, what does it mean, can we identify trends?
Well, look, I mean, it's not that broad of a question. I think what I'm saying is, what conclusions have you come to? And I know you're relatively new to the process, but as a department, if we're doing this FireStat process, we're about a year in. My question would be, or my assertion is that I believe that trend analysis is one of the benefits of intensive data analysis, and so I would like to see in the future for us as a commission to be able to hear from whoever it is, say these are the trends we are seeing. Whether it's trending up, trending down, and these are something like, you know, for example, one of the trends we are hearing is that, you know, our station commanders are citing this obstacle in improving their response time. So we're going to be looking into that. Or it could be, you know, generally we're seeing that, you know, these areas are, we're seeing improvements, these areas we're not seeing improvements. But if we're not willing to kind of ask those questions, then I believe it's a missed opportunity for us. And so that's you know, that's just the question I have is we for the last year we've gotten a FireStat verbal report, which has been essentially what you've given us, which is really just we did it. And what I'm saying is, how do we get to the next level of we did it, and here is what we're learning, here are the trends we're seeing.
Yeah.
That question you had about trend analysis, I think when we get to the point, excuse me if I get a little squishy with it. Okay, now we're good. Excellent question, excellent point. It goes to what Chief Poyer said about developing metric teams and scrubbing the data and then looking at it on a regular, almost weekly basis. That's where we're going to get our true trend analysis. And you're going to see more effective usage of metrics, I think, in the admin side of what we do, the Fire Prevention Bureau, or call processing time. The field FireStat has been focused on response times, super users, and chronic falses. And I think the comparison there will be the next go-around. We'll have a before and after with those three areas. Then we'll look at adding additional appropriate metrics to improve performance in the field. So the answer to your question is I would think first quarter next year when we have those metric teams developed, when we scrub the data, and ultimately when we have the CIO, the Chief Information Officer, on board, which provides us a software that we can electronically communicate those metrics automatically to Chief Poyer's desktop, and we'll keep a live dashboard going. So I understand the big picture, just we're still kind of in the crawling phase right now.
Well, I want to say something else because I went to the working group meetings for most of this year. I've missed like the last the last couple of months. So it's just been a long process of like gathering the data, cleaning it up, and then just FireStatting the whole field staff. And we've just finished doing that. So it's, you know, it's kind of in the beginning stages, but we've reached a really important milestone, which is that all the field staff has been FireStatted at this point. So it's going to take time, and it's actually taken a lot of work just to get here.
Yeah, well, I agree. I totally understand. I just, really my main point here is, and I think you've addressed it, which is let's get to the next level. I'm happy that we've done it. I appreciate the work that's gone in. So let's start to realize some of those benefits and actually get the trend analysis. Just really quickly, the public-facing reports that we're doing on the website, we're putting response times up on the website? Is that what we're doing? Is that right?
Well, the open data website for the city gets the cumulative data they do a data dump and they provide that so that people can go in and hack that data in a positive manner and try to develop some innovative solutions. And then we have a public-facing document that really, if you live in a fire station's given community, you can pull up that PDF document, search your local fire station by number, and see what their response times were for that given time period.
Great. Could I request then, as we move into this trend analysis and our metric unit, could we start getting quarterly reports on our response time data, saying here's did we go up, did we go down? I think that would be helpful for this commission to be able to actually see our response time data. I know we could all go on the website. My hacking skills have diminished considerably.
It's a PDF document on the LAFD.org website. It's published monthly, and when I spoke of the current validation process, the numbers for November will be published sometime in the next day or two, maybe even today.
Great. I think it'd be great for us to be able just to see it here as a quarterly report.
And that will identify what you're talking about as trends. But I do want to address when we say about we're just going through this process and going through the motions and we just did it.
Oh no, I didn't say we were going through motions. I'm saying when we get the verbal reports, the reports are simply we've done it. Yeah. We never get anybody up here saying, and here's what we learned. All we get is we're doing it at this station, this station, this station.
It's been meaningful and purposeful. There are several things we learned, and I could give you those examples. But the dashboard that we have that we're developing is going to allow us to more easily identify those trends. I believe if we look at that PDF document, you can look from month to month, and it shows you from month to month right on the cover page that you can see the trend up or downward for response times and whether it's turnout time, overall response time. And I think the trend we're hopefully going to see in our call processing time is it's going to trend downward because we've got this new tier dispatch system. But this process, I just want to be clear, Chief Terrazas didn't ask me to come in here to just go through the motions. This is going to be a meaningful, purposeful process, and we expect it to be a very positive result at the end.
Yeah, and let me be just 100% clear. I wasn't suggesting that when the fire stuff is happening, you're just going through them, because I've been to the meetings and I've seen. I think they're actually really valuable. I'm simply referring to when we get our reports as a commission, we don't get a very in-depth look at what's going on, and not all of us are able to be at the meetings. And so when the request I'm making is that when we get reports, when you're ready to do it, which hopefully it sounds like it's going to be the first quarter of next year, that we get a in-depth view as to what's going on, as opposed to we've finished fire statting in the field, now we're moving on to the administration, which was the report today, effectively. And actually, what I'm hoping to hear is, and these are the trends we're seeing, and these are the actions we're seeing out in the field, so that we can start to see some of the meaning up here without having to attend every fire state meeting, because you've got a window into it that we don't have. That's all I'm saying. Does that make sense?
And it may not be that you report all of it, because some of it might be sensitive. There might be different reasons why we don't make those publicly available. So I think there's a different conversation that needs to happen about what would be appropriate because basically you're talking about bringing it to commission, you're talking about making it public. And that, so we could just have this conversation.
Yeah. Broad trends.
I guess just my framework is a little different maybe. I saw when I first came onto the commission 2.5 years ago, sort of we're looking at national trends or national standards, and it sort of was a round hole with a square peg, or a square peg in a round hole, because we have a very unique city, and trying to figure out how to sort of parse this into some sort of national standard really didn't make a whole lot of sense, at least in my mind, and also in the city's mind and the department's mind, I guess, which is ergo we end up with this FireStat tool, which is great because now we're making sense of all the things we do and how we do it and the way we go about it in a very structured, formalized manner with great input and everybody's involvement. And then my presumption was at a certain point, once we sort of have a baseline of information about a lot of the moving parts that go around here, we'll have sort of a set of goals that will fall out of that. As people that manage and lead things, we like goals because we like to hit it out of the park, and then once we kind of understand where we're at, we'll create some goals, and then we'll be able to measure ourselves against our own goals instead of sort of a blunt instrument of these national standards where we're comparing ourselves against, Seattle Fire Department or something. It just didn't or Arizona. It didn't make any sense. So I think this is great because we've now surfaced a lot of things that we, now have more formally sort of been able to make sense of as a department as an ongoing process. And again, the trends are one thing, but then we'll have, I would presume, some goals, and then we'll be able to measure ourselves in a way in which makes sense for us, which I think is sort of the ultimate output of this. Does that sort of make sense in terms of, I would ask the chief or you in terms of, does that framework kind of meet where you think of this is going?
Absolutely. Comparing us to a national standard doesn't always work. It's a double-edged sword being a large, busy organization. We're the largest metropolitan fire department in the country that's attempting to utilize this performance-based metric process. And we have a wealth of data, but we have to collect that data. We have to warehouse it somewhere, and then we have to analyze it. And it's not something that can happen in a week-long or two-week-long process, but that's the one thing I wanted to emphasize is the senior leadership team on this department has really embraced the concept. They're engaged. And if we can come up with these solutions, we get that CIO into place, and we start coming up with some technology solutions, I believe that it's going to be a very, very positive process, and it's going to allow us to really improve a lot of the processes that we do internally and then ultimately for the customers. And that's what we're shooting for.
Yeah, I think it's been very positive even thus far because it's given a voice to a lot of the, field, management and line personnel where they can then say, here's things we see. I've heard just in the couple meetings I've sat in on some great things that otherwise probably wouldn't have made it across the whole organization. And this is a tool where somebody can have a great idea, a firefighter out in an area for getting into a gated community with a special tool. And there's a lot of gated communities in LA, and maybe we can use that tool across the whole system. So it's great information. And I know that Commissioner Glazer feels similarly or the same way as does, Commissioner Ibarra and everyone else. So I commend the department and what you're doing and the chief for embracing this, and I think it's a good thing, and I hear what Andrew, Glazer's saying in terms of, when we get to some goals, it'd be nice to see how we're doing. How do we handicap ourselves against ourselves at whatever it is the point in time that we can sort of really grasp all that data? How are we doing? I think he wants to know, and that would be great for all of us to know, how are we doing? But, we're not quite there maybe right now, but in the future we'll get to a point where we can say, hey, we're doing great. Here's where we were, now here's where we are. We're trending on it. We're doing well in all these different moving parts we got. That's what I hear.
Agreed. Thank you.
And with the computer analysis, I'm sure we'll be able to see that the response times will vary throughout the city, and perhaps we'll have explanation as to why they're varying, because I know they can't be the same throughout the whole city because of lots of different things. But that will be interesting to see.
Maybe that might be a good place to start, because I don't think we've actually had that discussion before this commission. I know it was a big issue before. It's still a big issue, but maybe just having this commission understand that it does vary throughout the city. It's always going to vary throughout the city because the geography is different. So maybe starting with that, and then we can sort of build, with more information, as the time progresses.
Right, we have that available now, and what we're looking at, and one of the things we realize is that the response time is the time that you pick up the phone and call 911 till the time that our resources are knocking on your door. That's the total operational response time, and that's going to vary from district to district based on a number of different factors. But we have the ability to compare shift to shift at that same exact geographical location that tells us what the trend is on a given shift. So that's what we've been utilizing throughout the emergency operations entities in the organization right now. And the 4 geographical bureaus is going to give us an opportunity to drill down even further and start having a lot more discussion and dialogue and ultimately accountability about what those numbers actually are.
Very good.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. So moving on to 5C, which is the report by the department relative to the proposed chief officer minimum qualification requirements.
Good morning, Madam President, Commissioners, Fire Chief. Chief Mathis, Deputy Chief, Charge of Administrative Operations. You have before you the board report, proposed chief officer minimum requirements. We are submitting the proposed revisions to our job bulletins for all chief officers' ranks. That will gradually build an educational component into our promotional requirements for all chief officer positions. Based on input from the Commission from the October 21st meeting when we first presented this, we did engage in dialogue with the Chief Officers Association, got their input, and we worked towards getting an agreement regarding all the minimum requirements. Based on the direction from the Fire Chief, we felt the best course of action was actually to sign into a letter of agreement with the Chief Officers Association so we could have this cast in stone, and we had their input. The new requirements for chief officers, minimum requirements will be phased in over a 6-year period. This will allow candidates ample time to meet the newly implemented requirements. And if you have any questions.
Okay. Well, we've actually had a lot of discussion about this already. I think this is like the third meeting that we've discussed this. And generally, I find this acceptable. I have had conversations with UFLAC and Mr. Frank Lima recently about this. And I know that the UFLAC is really concerned about the battalion chief requirements because that particularly impacts their members who want to promote. And we did an informal sit down with Chief Officers Association to discuss the other requirements.
Mm-hmm.
So it seems fair, and I'm willing to accept this with the amendment that we revisit the battalion chief requirement after we have an opportunity to sit down and do the same thing with UFLAC, only as to the battalion chief. So move forward with assistant chiefs and deputy chief requirements as written here.
I'd like to know what the difference is between this paper and the paper you bought me before.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Except having the meeting, what is the difference in the in the goal toward moving into the degree program?
For the battalion chiefs?
No, that means
no, not for battalion chief.
Difference, but I think the other one was like 4 years. This is like 6 years. It's a little more flexibility.
For all of them? Are you asking for all of them?
Right.
I'm asking the department.
Okay.
Tell me the difference.
What we did is extended the timeline out for the minimum requirements. So for the 2015, nothing would change as far as the requirements that are on board right now. Starting in 2017, that's when minimum requirements would kick in. And then we also have the option of meeting the minimum requirements regarding associate's degree or chief officer fire certification. And then going forward, we even included deputy chief minimum requirements for 2016. We did not put that in before.
I'd like to add that, as I recall, the last time we visited this issue, Chief Fox got up and opposed what we were proposing. So we went back and worked with COA, and this was the resolution to that disagreement between the department and COA.
And did you, since the UFLAC members were the ones who promote the battalion chiefs, the captains, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Did you meet with them?
No, we did not.
Oh, okay. It seems to me, I'm not sure that I want to waive college classes for CSFT. What is that? Not a substitute for that. That could be a desirable, highly desirable, but I don't think that that's a substitute for the education that you receive at a university. And to me, it looks like it's stretched out far too far. And with this grandfather in clause, they have people with a minimum of 5 years get grandfathered in, but the requirements are 6 years if you total them all together. So if you would be a battalion chief, it's 4 years, and then for the assistant chief, you have 2 years. And so totally it would be more like 6 years as opposed to 5 years. And so you're grandfathering the men at 5 years and 25 years of service would exempt them from education and experience requirements. And somehow I have a problem with this because it seems like it's just stretching it out far, far too much. It's just going too long because I don't see if you have the next test for I'm not looking at battalion chief because that's another issue that I think that needs to be tabled until the discussion is done with UFLAC. But with the assistant chief, you have an AA degree for the next test, which is 15 is, I'm not concerned with that because that's around the corner.
Just for procedural clarity, because I think you've moved on to, so can we just have a vote on the motion to table the battalion chief and then have, because it sounds like you want to have a discussion about the assistant chief and the deputy chief?
Right.
Can we do that?
Yeah. I'll make a motion to uncouple the battalion chief from the assistant and deputy chief educational requirements.
And also to table that?
To table that.
Okay. So
I second that.
Okay. All in favor? Aye. So we have 4.
No.
Okay, so we have 4-1. So that the battalion chief is decoupled and it's tabled. So now we can have a discussion about assistant chiefs and deputy chiefs.
Because that's okay. So to me, it looks like the assistant chief by 2017 would be required to have a bachelor's degree as opposed to waiting until 2019. Because that's really pushing it down the road.
4 years.
And and
They got to get to school. They got to register. They got to.
Well,
Yeah, if I may.
Are there possibly people who already are qualified to do it? Are we waiting to send people to school to get qualified? I don't think that's the issue. I think the issue should be, this is our requirement, and if you meet that, then you come in. I don't think that we're going out and recruiting people and we're going to pay them to go to school and then they can qualify. It doesn't seem as if that would be our requirement. I think that we should be looking for people who meet the requirements by 2017.
Well, I think
there's not going to be that many people that you hire.
Right. Well, I think if somebody already has, the required degree and meets the other requirements, that there's no reason why they can't be promoted if they meet the other requirements and the other, whatever the department feels that they should move forward. There's nothing that would keep them from it. So I think it was designed just to not disadvantage somebody who doesn't have any of the educational background right now to promote to that position.
I wouldn't want to disadvantage them, but I'm trying to work on increasing not necessarily the quality, because I've had this discussion with a lot of people over the last few months, and it offends some people who don't have degrees, but they have the experience and the knowledge, which I totally agree is a quality, characteristic. If you have that, it's fine. That's great. But my interest is in moving the requirements to a bachelor's degree so that we look for that person that has that, as opposed to looking for the person who has the AA degree and then moving them into that requirement. If you get what you ask for, and I believe if we ask for that, we'll get it. And you don't hire like hundreds of assistant chiefs, do you?
No, we do not.
You only hire a few. You're not looking for the world. So to raise it to a bachelor's degree is not an imposition, except for people that just like to drag their feet and want to move slowly or not do it at all. And I'm not interested in not doing it at all. I'm interested in trying to make a difference in what we have here. And it speaks nothing to the people who have not gone to college, because many people have wonderful experiences, and I know some of them. They've been very successful. But this is just my desire for what I'd like to see this department demonstrate. And it's a higher quality as far as requiring the educational services. And I think we all agree that there are things that you learn in college that you may not learn in experience. How to toss hoses and do ladders and all the other things that you might learn may not have anything to do with developing and writing policy. From this department, this desk, we always say, these are the things I want to see done. But somebody out there has to go and write it. It needs to be written appropriately. Everything has to be done in a different way. And I think that we're in a new age, and we need to do things in a different way. And I'm not happy with the long-term effect of this particular program and the grandfathering in.
So I hear what you're saying, and I understand your perspective. I think you did a really good job of articulating it. My concern is that, this is the third time we've spoken, we've talked about this. We went back and negotiated with a COA about it. So if you're talking about making this even more restrictive from their perspective, like upping the requirements of education and making it sooner, that, we're just going to have another argument with COA. That's my concern.
If you don't mind, we did some data analysis on the current educational level of the battalion chiefs on the job. We have 67 battalion chiefs. 7 have an AA degree, 20 have a BA or BS degree, 13 have an MA or an MS degree, but more than half don't have any degree at all. In discussion with the chief officers regarding the minimum requirements, they said there's a lot of impediments as far as getting an education if you haven't gotten one before and getting on the job. The reasons were varied, but the common theme was financial limitations, family commitments, and basically a lack of department support as far as we do not have a career development unit. We do not have tuition reimbursement much as LAPD does. So those are the reasons why they threw in there, and that's why we moved those minimum requirements back. And just a comment to your comment, Commissioner, regarding the chief officer's fire certificate. That's a state fire training program. It's a very robust course schedule. It's a standard for a lot of departments, even a minimum qualification to take a chief's exam. It's a minimum of 11 classes, and there's such classes as organizational development, human relations, financial management, personal labor relations, master planning, contemporary issues and concepts. So it's a very robust course, and it's equivalent to an associate's degree, if not more.
So do they get credit from a university?
Yes, they do.
They can get a university credit for it,
yes,
and they can use that toward their AA degree or their bachelor.
Yes.
But I still don't think it should be a substitute unless they get the AA degree credit. It states, you have an AA degree, or it goes toward a bachelor's degree. Not that it's equivalent, but that it actually counts at the university as far as getting credit for it. Then it makes it a very different program. And I would think that if that person was interested in becoming a chief, they would probably want to take that class or program anyway. Not just, I would think they would want to take the class, that program anyway, because it would help to strengthen them as an individual who's seeking to become a chief.
So if I could just say, I don't disagree with anything you've said. In a perfect world, we would make these requirements take hold sooner. Certainly the exemptions that are in there remind me of some saying about old dogs and new tricks. But it's what I understand from certainly being on this commission and other assignments is that there's an art of compromise here. And as I said, like you, I would like to see this move faster. And like you, I believe that when folks say that there are impediments to getting degrees, I just don't think they're quite as high as people think they are. But I also recognize that there is a large membership out there, and change is hard. Mm-hmm. And if we're going to get to a bachelor's degree by 2019 for our ACs, it's not as soon as I'd like. It's a compromise that I have come to accept. And on the battalion chief question, the reason why I was not in favor of delaying this any longer is because I think we've been talking about this for 6 months and there was ample time for discussion. Now, as my colleagues, you disagree, and I just respectfully disagree on it. That's fine. I do want to remind us, though, that we have a motion from a previous meeting that for a negotiating instruction, which is that we end up with a bachelor's degree, whatever happens in the interim, but the end result is a bachelor's degree, and that has not changed. And so I want to make sure that that is clear, that the bachelor's degree requirement for battalion chief is a previous motion on the table. What happens in the intervening time, I understand, will be a conversation with UFLAC. That will happen. Great. But that's where we end up, and that has not changed. The last thing that I would say is that I do think that as a department, if we want to encourage our members to get degrees, like LAPD, I think we should be looking at ways to subsidize that education a little bit. And so I would like us to just look into what the possibilities are for some sort of a revolving tuition remission program that would that would help us think about what we can do there. I think over time we're going to see many more of our members have degrees anyways, but I certainly believe in the interim, since this is a new requirement, the way that we can, if there are ways we can help ease the change through, then I am in favor of ways to ease the change. And so one way to do that is to look at some tuition remission. Not 100%, because I don't think we can afford that, but I think it is worth looking at how LAPD administers their tuition, or I believe it's a revolving tuition subsidy form or a fund. And so I'd be interested to hear a little more about that when we could get a report on what that might look like. Certainly I've spoken with the mayor directly about it, and he is certainly in favor of subsidizing a tuition if we can find a way to do that.
Find the money. That's great.
Right. So, of course, there's always a financial thing, but even if it's not now, at some point in the not too distant future, I think that could be something this department could do. I also do want to recognize, though, that when our members do get degrees, they get a 3% pension-based bonus. 3% pension-based bonus. Is that not true? Somebody? True. Okay. True. For master's, yeah. For a master's degree, not for there's nothing for a BA? 2%, sorry. 2% for a BA, 3% for a master's degree.
A total of 5%.
So nothing to sneeze at. Pension-based bonuses are nothing to sneeze at, and it is money that you get for undertaking that work. So anyway, those are just my comments on this. I do. Although it's not what I would have originally liked, it is progress, and so I want to recognize that it's progress, and that is always, I think it's a difficult thing in a department of this size with this many competing interests. I want to recognize the efforts of the chief and his staff for getting us to where we're getting to, and I look forward to us coming to some agreement with UFLAC on the BC, hopefully in the not too distant future. Thanks.
Madam President, I'd like to just point out that the report supports what I said. You have battalion chiefs. You have 33 of them who qualify with BAs or masters, and you don't need that many assistant chiefs. So I think that there is evidence that there's enough people that we could begin with, and other people could begin to move into that position. But I understand what Commissioner Glazer said, and he is right. There are sometimes when you have to bite the bullet. You may not always like what you see, and I certainly do not like this. But
well, I mean, the only thing that I want to say, because we've talked about this a lot, is that if you ask me in the abstract, I think everybody in the department should have degrees. Right. But if you ask me if somebody who's 37 or 42 or 47 that they should go back to college, it's just a different story. I mean, I went to college when I was 17, and it was very easy to do it at that time. I would not go back to school now. And if you told me that I needed to go back to school in order to get my next job, yeah, I would fight it. So it makes sense that they would do that. It makes sense that COA and that UFLAC don't like this. I mean, once we had this discussion, I think my opinion about this changed.
I'm certain I was over 40 when I got my master's, so it's not a matter of age. And my mother was much older than that when she went back to school. So,
well, I really commend you, because that's a rare thing. I don't think that I would go back for anything.
I went back at 35 for a doctorate, so it was not easy, and I commend the department for embracing it, and the chief officers, and just as Commissioner Glazer said, for the chief and his staff and yourself working on this. I would hope that the department will restate, what was it that you called it, a counselor of some sort, to help find some grant money and
career development.
Career development. I think that's really one of the keys here, more so than looking for the mayor's office to be helpful with finding money. Maybe they can. I'm not certain whether there's a role in there for him or not, as much as for the department to look at different programs that may exist that we could embrace and encourage our folks. And I know we have some programs, right? The University of one of them, I forget which, Laverne or Phoenix or someone that we work with at Frank, I think, right, to put on some classes.
Yes, that's correct.
So there's stuff out there, and I think if somebody woke up in the morning and went to bed at night looking for other ways for us to be able to get some discounts and things, there might be some things out there. But that said, I'd like to see if I could, make a motion if you would like for one to be made.
No. Oh, yeah. Public comment first and then the motion. So thank you.
Thank you.
So we have a public comment from Frank Lima from UFLAC.
And you know, we have many people who are going to school right now who work in this department.
That's great.
Many people.
Morning, Madam President, Commissioners. Frank Lima, President of UFLAC. I amended my talking points quite a bit due to the earlier motion to amend Board 14106R. So thank you for cutting out the battalion chiefs on that on a 4-1 vote. We strongly oppose the new education requirements that were being, unilaterally shoved down our throat. So my talking points have changed in the sense of, remember, these are prospective promotions, so they affect UFLAC members. It was brought up that on October 21st, hey, Chief Fox came up here, opposed this, so we met with the COA and got a letter of agreement, a negotiated letter of agreement. Well, I was at the same meeting in opposition of it, in addition to representing the Stentorians and speaking on their behalf of that meeting for artificial barriers promoting in. And what happened? What did we see happen? Was a demonstrated lack of respect for the labor organization. So I really thank the commissioners for holding the department in line and sitting down with us at the table where it's all supposed to work out. And, I know the mayor would want this, an inclusion of UFLAC. He'd want UFLAC to be treated the same, and really that's all we're asking for. There's many great leaders on our fire department. Some have degrees, some don't. Madam President made a good point. Later on in people's lives, things change a little bit, but from a low-level manager, I'd like to really, talk about things that we will negotiate, such as the chief officers have it in here, an experience credit, a grandfather clause. Well, we would expect the same thing. We'll handle that at the table. But on a comment that Commissioner Glazer had, with all due respect, you mentioned that it's a done deal for bachelors for battalion chief, and I'll tell you, you're absolutely wrong on that. We'll go to the Employee Relations Board on that because that's what we have to work out at the table in regards to that. You brought up negotiations. We've met, and how negotiations work. It's not through the Fire Commission. It's through the Employee Relations Ordinance, a signature of the union president, and the fire chief or the fire chief's designee representing the city, not the commissioners. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so motion?
Motion to adopt the educational requirements for deputy chief and assistant chief as written?
As amended.
As amended, sorry. Yeah. Not including the BC.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Madam President, I would like for the records to reflect that I abstained.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Can't abstain.
An abstain is not considered an aye vote in Robert's Rules of Order. I vote no.
Okay, so that's 4-1. Okay, so moving on to 5B, report. Yeah, that's right. Report by the department relative to the resource toolkit to reduce ambulance patient offloads.
Good morning, Madam President, Commissioners, Chief Trazos. I'm Greg Rayner. I'm here again to brief you on the board report in front of you regarding the resource toolkit to reduce patient offload delays at hospital emergency rooms. As you may recall, back in April 23rd at your special meeting, I went ahead and I presented to you that the California Hospital Association, in coordination with the California State EMS Authority, had convened a collaborative work group to look at this issue. And their efforts were going to be to try and develop a resource toolkit that would be utilized by hospitals and local EMS agencies to try and address this issue. In attachment 1 of your packet today is that resource toolkit. The document's 105 pages long. It's very extensive, discusses a number of issues related to this issue of wall time, if you will. It's a really good primer. And I think if you were to look and do a Google search, you probably wouldn't find a lot of documents like it. I think really in California we're the leaders here in actually beginning this dialogue with our hospital partners and with our regulating body. So it's brought a lot of issues to the forefront. To that end, we were scheduled to get together back in October with the state and the Hospital Association to look at next steps and where we were going with this actual document. Because of the Ebola-related issues that were affecting hospitals, the meeting was postponed. It's been rescheduled to February 10th of 2015. and we'll move forward from there. So I'm here to answer any questions if you have any.
Is there anything specific in this report that would help LA with their problem?
Actually, ma'am, there's a significant amount of information that would be very beneficial for helping our local hospital partners and also our local EMS agency in LA County. There's a number of items and topics I'm interested in actually attending the meeting, or a department representative attending this meeting in February, because I think there's still a lot of questions that need to be answered on where we're going with this to continue this effort to try and affect this. Out of this document, what was noted is that they did go ahead and they've surveyed all of the local EMS agencies in the state of California, all 33. They also surveyed 125 hospitals. And of those, a significant number of them agreed that we do have a significant problem in the state of California. The people that felt we had the significant incident or significant issue of this wall time represented about 70% of the state's population. So really, when you think about it, the areas that have the highest populations have this issue of hospital wall time. Obviously, in Los Angeles, we're the biggest area in California, and it is agreed upon, I think, by all the providers here locally that we do have an issue. So,
were any suggestions recommended?
There's a number of recommendations and suggestions recommended, yes, ma'am, within the document. Actually, some of the factors for success that the document discusses is optimizing emergency department intake processes. The successful continuous quality improvement measures are really beneficial for hospitals, and that the hospitals and the local EMS agencies truly have to collaborate if we're going to move this forward. There's not a lot of recommendations in the document for providers such as ourselves. This document really truly is addressing a hospital-based issue and utilizing our regulating bodies or our local EMS agencies to help move that dialogue forward.
Yeah, I just might add, to abide by the EMTALA, Emergency Medical Transfer and Active Labor Act and everything, the issue is at the hospital level in terms of throughput. So, if a hospital can get their act together and get patients processed more rapidly, then we wouldn't have quite the same issue with wall time. But I think the fire department is doing a great job in terms of getting the patients to the hospital. The issue frequently is a problem with the hospital.
I kind of wish that we could fire set the hospitals, because it seems like some of them do a great job of, expediting it, and some of them don't. And so maybe we kind of have to show them best practices from other hospitals.
This year, I know that we briefed you previously, Dr. Exing and I went and actually visited chief executive officers at a number of our hospitals that account for the largest amount of wall time. Discussions were very beneficial, but really what they do is they really reinforce Dr. Hara's position is that this is truly a hospital throughput issue. If we, it's not necessarily the ambulances that are transporting patients to emergency rooms, but it's all of the patients that are coming across the threshold, no matter how they get there. And, I think ED visits in California have gone up about 20% from 2007 to 2012. So our emergency rooms are seeing more and more patients. And they really, truly do need to streamline some of these processes. And some of the best practices that they've identified that are actually in the document, if you're interested in reading it, are the fact that if you streamline emergency department registration processes, if you have people in place within the emergency departments, if you have nurse ratios, staffing ratios that are conducive to that, and if you move patients through your hospitals, you won't have this wall time issue. For that, we need the assistance, obviously, of our regulating body and our hospital partners to address some of that.
Recognizing that it wouldn't necessarily be productive to sort of report on each hospital individually, I still think it would be educational for us to get kind of a quarterly report just on how much time how much time we're spending, what's the average wall time we're seeing, are we seeing an up or down movement as we start to implement some of these new things. I know it's a source of major frustration for our members, certainly. It is also a source of, significant issues when it goes to resource utilization.
Actually, the California, the Office of Statewide Health Plan and Development, they actually have that data currently.
So if we could just start to be able to see that here, so we can see if we're seeing progress on it as we implement kind of new stuff, would that be something that we could look at regularly?
Yes, Commissioner, it is. And actually, in that vein, we went ahead and actually began to utilize some of our software at Metropolitan Fire Communications, our AVL software, to validate whether our bed wait time data was accurate.
Mm-hmm.
And what we determined was that we do have some inconsistencies in our data. So I think our first step as a department is to actually continue to refine it and validate our data first and make sure that it's as clean as possible before we report it further. What we were finding is that we had ambulances that were reporting they were in the hospital on the wall, but they were actually moving and they hadn't made themselves available before returning to their districts. So I think with some of the things that the board's done with the 15-16 budget, with a dispatch manager, with nurse educators to help us with the education and remediation in the field, with a chief information officer, with reporting some of these processes in FireStat, I think it's going to help us move this discussion forward and actually be able to continue to look at this from a critical view.
Chief, I have a question. Is wall time a construct of the LAFD? I mean, is there a policy we have that may not be necessary for us to have for our paramedics or our EMS workers to go to the hospital and have to necessarily wait with whomever it is that we bring in? I mean, what's our responsibility there? Not what is it we're doing, but what's our actual responsibility once having transported somebody to a hospital?
Health and Safety Code actually discusses this, and it's also included within TALA. I know Dr. Hart's probably very good at this, but what it says basically is that we share this responsibility for the transfer of patient care. And although we arrive on a hospital property and the patient remains in our custody, the hospital is responsible for providing a fairly quick, immediate triage of that patient. However, continuation of care and that advanced level of evaluation, if you will, doesn't necessarily take place immediately. And we do share that responsibility for providing that effective transfer of patient care. So until that can occur, we continue to have to maintain the responsibility for that patient kind of in a shared relationship with the hospitals. So it's not necessarily an LAFD or a local issue. This is something that's statewide. And obviously, when you look at, patient transfers across the country, there's a number of states that have the same issue that are addressing it. Just the fact that we have a number of emergency rooms in hospitals that are closing to 911 patients. We have people that are accessing 911 more frequently now and are actually utilizing us to go to the hospital. And this is an issue that we're going to have to continue to look at and address.
How nuanced is it, though, at that moment that we arrive as to where our responsibility may, by virtue of whatever you just recited in terms of the act? I mean, there's a moment in time there where somebody's making a human sort of decision as to whether or not they've now been with this person enough or handed it off to some. I mean, do they register when they come in, right?
Not necessarily, and that's part of the issue, is that we can arrive at a hospital, and many times because of the volume of patients that are in that emergency room or because of the issues that are ongoing in that emergency room, whether it be internal disaster, patients that are critical, they may ask us to wait. There is no registration, there's nothing done, and that starts to create that wall time, if you will, that we're waiting to initiate that transfer of care, actually removing the patient from our gurney and placing the patient either in a chair or in a bed at the emergency room and transferring that care.
But I also know that we have had, pre-deployed members of our department at hospital stationed there from time to time, where you go there and there's like at Cedars, there's, a captain or something there. Is there a way of transferring the responsibility from the arriving transport unit to a person that's stationed at how many ever hospitals it is that we have contracts with?
I understand where you're going. We've looked at that, and actually we do have department policy in place that does allow for the dispatch of an EMS battalion captain in the incidents where we have an ambulance that's in an emergency room for more than an hour or 3 ambulances that are in an emergency room for more than 15 minutes. And what that EMS battalion captain will come in and do is they'll actually raise that level of discussion with hospital leadership and see if we can move these patients and get our resources back available to the community. So that is actually occurring right now. But the actual true physical transfer of care between two department people in the absence of a patient transfer of care to the emergency room, we haven't done that necessarily. The fact is that we have obviously very sick patients many times that are under the actual care of our paramedics, and until that patient transfer can occur, it's probably best to maintain that level of treatment and care.
Yeah, you have to understand, like even the county, which for ages has had a contract with private ambulance companies to provide the transport. The ambulance company personnel, they have wall time that's identical to our wall time.
Sure. I'm just wondering if there's a way of brainstorming where we have pre-positioned people that then act as the sort of liaison in order to free up our units and kick
Or
them
maybe
back out.
just for those hospitals where we know, because it seems like it's not most hospitals. It's a significant
I
minority.
think certainly an area for further research and study. Obviously, there's some logistical issues here. I would suggest that if we have additional personnel, we certainly would want them in ambulances serving our communities and maybe not sitting in a private hospital for hire, if you will, trying to assist their staff in this transfer of care. So it's certainly a topic for additional.
Yeah, the other issues like the county hospitals, Harbor UCLA and Big County, LA County USC, they even had a movie called Code Black, where for a lot of the people just walking into the emergency room who really probably did require emergency services frequently had to wait as long as 1 day.
Wow.
I would be interested in knowing which hospitals actually have the longest wait times for our paramedics and what those hours add up to. But I'd like to, we could find like the top 5. I would just like to know whether I'm certain that they're probably county hospitals, but without having the data from you, it wouldn't help me. I would really like to have that information.
You're accurate. The emergency rooms right now locally that we transport to 57 hospitals. The hospitals that we go to in volume are the hospitals that have the greatest fall time. It's as simple as that. It's the county hospitals and the very high volume emergency rooms. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Oh, so do I have a motion to receive and file?
Motion to receive and file.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. So 5E is verbal update by the department relative to the 5-step process of community risk reduction program.
Madam President, members of the Fire Commission, Chief Terrazas, my name is Kwame Cooper. I'm currently assigned to the Fire Prevention Bureau as the Assistant Bureau Commander working with Chief Vidovich. And I know this topic came before the Commission in the past regarding our initiating a pilot program. So I just wanted to give you a verbal update under the new leadership of Chief Terrazas, whose vision clearly around risk reduction is just to reduce fires and injuries for people in high-risk communities throughout the city of Los Angeles. And to do that, he wants to implement a pilot program using the 5-step process around community risk reduction. The steps are relatively simple. The first one begins with gathering whatever data is available. We're fortunate to work with our Fire Stat section with Chief Poirier, who is now looking at data from 2014 with regard to fires in the home and falls that involve senior citizens 65 years or higher. And so we'll look at that from 2014. That'll be the roadmap to tell us exactly where we might want to consider doing a pilot program. The pilot program will be a collaboration between the Fire Prevention Bureau, Chief Castro's shop, Emergency Services, EMS Services will be involved in that, as well as Fire Stat section, to look at the data as the first step toward implementing the program. Chief Terrazas' vision is to make sure that this is embedded in the fire department as a value, so it will exist within the 4 bureaus, which is scheduled to launch in January. And the Fire Prevention Bureau, will be working with Chief Castro as the 4 bureaus are being pushed forward to get a pilot program implemented. The goal simply is to look at finalizing our project implementation plan by April of 2015, where it'll clearly lay out who is doing what by when, with very specific deliverables, of which that report will come to the Fire Commission for your review and approval.
Okay, thanks.
Any questions?
No. What's the timeline for it?
The The actual report will be April 2015.
Okay.
But as far as what we're doing right now is the first step, which is basically gathering the data, analyzing the data from this year, 2014.
Okay. And we'll have it in April.
Yes, you'll have a written implementation plan in April of 2015.
Is that mostly fire-based then? The data that you're going to be collecting, is it basically fires, or does it also include like medical-related issues as well, or how does that break down?
So right now we're just looking at two specific areas: fires in the home. The place where people feel the safest is where they're most likely to die, 85% of the time, and falls with respect to our baby booming, aging population, people 65 years and older, with respect to falls and injuries, where we can actually insert a intervention strategy around education to prevent a lot of that.
Great.
So it will just be those two particular areas.
So you're taking the whole city and then you're figuring out where there's the greatest preponderance of those incidences, and then you'll do a pilot program in order to try to see if we can intervene. Is that kind of the basic?
That's exactly what it is. Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
5F is verbal update by the department relative to the preliminary findings of the California Environmental Protection Agency evaluation of the CUPA.
Madam President, Commissioners, Chief Terrazas, City Attorney, Ms. Gomez, Fire Marshal John Vidovich. My verbal report is to notify the Commission that the EPA conducted their triennial evaluation of our department's CUPA program. We've been notified that we are going to be graded unsatisfactory for the third consecutive time. What this means is that the state is going to notify the governing body, which is the City Council, of this. We don't have a copy of the report yet. However, once that report does come to us, we'll bring it forward to the Commission. When I met with the EPA, I asked how many violations do we have. They indicated we have 18 violations. Of the 18, 7 were repeated over the past 9 years, which obviously was a concern to me. As we began to evaluate that, we instituted a reorganization to have the CUPA section report directly now to the Assistant Fire Marshal rather than to a battalion chief. The other piece we began is to analyze all our policies, looking at best practices across the state on how the successful CUPAs are operating. Really, the key area of our numerous violations is in the area of underground storage tanks. One of the recommendations was that the department consider civilianizing those sworn inspectors to civilian inspectors. We looked back the last 5 years. We've had continuous turnover. Discussing this with our staff, some of our staff indicate that as they come on board as a fire inspector, they did not inspect, that they would inspecting groundwater contamination. And we're looking to continue to educate our folks. However, it continues to be a task that we're challenged with. In regards to metrics, the average underground tank inspection per the state should take 2 to 4 hours. We have 12 inspectors who do this work. We have 1,350 inspections in the city. However, we continue to be deficient. The highest level we've been in the past 5 years is at a 66% rate. The lowest we've been at is 43%. In the past, we've carried some vacancies in that area. However, per Chief Terrazas' direction, anything state mandated, we're continuing to fill our inspectors and fill those positions. But as we get the report back, we'll bring it forward. The CUPA currently is in jeopardy. I really want to make that a point. And what I mean by that is the state can force us to relinquish the CUPA to the county. Last year, they did the first step in regards to our local oversight program, where the State Water Board took over the cleanup and remediation
of contaminated sites for the department's failure to implement that program in an efficient manner. So I wanted to ensure that we recognize that we do have some challenges. We've began incrementally to put changes within leadership, within policy, and my goal is to bring a project plan back to the Commission once we receive the report. The report should be released either in the next 2 weeks or the first or second week in January, and I will bring an action plan with the steps in regards to who's going to be held accountable to ensuring that the 18 violations are acted upon swiftly. Any questions?
A question, Chief. Do we get reimbursed then from the state to do these inspections, or sort of how does that work?
Yeah, the revenue collected within the CUPA is approximately $5.6 million. So in essence, it covers the cost of our salaries. So
the revenue is collected from the user or
from the inspections we do.
So it's not from the state?
No, not from the state.
So, this is the second report that we will get. I mean, the audit will be the second audit we got. This is one of the first things we got when we came on the Commission. We're, as you have stated, we have challenges. I would restate that as we are not serving the citizens of Los Angeles right now, and I think we have to be prepared. I would sooner proactively return this to the county than have the state come and force us to do it because they have deemed us to be unable to execute on this. That's just how I feel. I know you, and I appreciate I appreciate everything you said about coming back with an action plan and metrics. I think we also need to set ourselves an internal drop dead where if we do not feel that we are making adequate progress, that we have some contingencies in place because we just owe it to the people of Los Angeles for us to keep an eye on toxics and underground tanks and the water supply. And if we can't do it, we can't do it. But it's and there's no shame in us saying, you know what, this wasn't the right fit for us, and so we want to relinquish control if that's what we have to do. But to me, it is a shame for us to say that we can do it and not execute. And so I'll be looking to see when the report comes, and we can have a look and we can have a further discussion about it. But certainly that's what I'll be considering, and just as you are considering that action plan, that's just something that I would be.
That's actually a good point, and so maybe that's something that you want to factor in to your action plan. I think we should have a bigger discussion. Is this something that is? I mean, I think it's in our mission, but if we can't accomplish it, we should start thinking about contingency plans, and it might mean to give it back to the county.
Chief,
but we should have a discussion about it.
Chief, you were saying that there's 1,300 and some odd underground storage tanks.
Approximately 1,350 underground tanks in the city.
So I was trying to reconcile. Then you said that we had about 6 repeated violations or 8 or something like that. So is it for all of the storage tank inspections, or is it just for a few? Or how's that?
In regards to the 7 repeated violations, it's throughout the entire program. Okay. So as an example, we're supposed to be completing 100% of our inspections. We're at 66%. For this first quarter, we should have been at 25%. We were at 9%. Part and parcel, we've had some turnover in the unit, and there's a state certification that's required for our inspectors to obtain prior to being certified to go out and conduct that inspection. The difference between a Fire Prevention Bureau and inspector versus a lot of our other promotional jobs, and I'll use the example of an engineer. The day that an engineer has his or her badge pinned on them, they hit the ground running. They're expected to pump, drive, and respond to emergency calls. Here within fire prevention, we promote, and then there's on-the-job training. Before, specifically, an environmental inspector can go out and do the work, there's 6 months of training. So positions could be filled today, but before I get any productivity, there's six months of additional training. The state provides periodic training. We're obligated to go to their training, and it's quarterly. So depending on when we promote and when the cycle of training is, we could miss that window of opportunity. We've discussed the possibility, because we're a large agency, for the state to come down to train us, but we're working on different solutions to a large problem.
Mm-hmm. Thanks.
So what's the optimal number of inspectors you should have?
That's a great question. As we drill down into the data, not only within underground tanks, but the entire Fire Prevention Bureau, we are bringing a report back on that as well in regards to optimal inspectors. However, specifically to underground tanks, it's our feeling if we separated our hazardous material inspections and our underground tank inspections, we should be able to do the 1,350 inspections with 7 inspectors on an annual basis.
And how many do you have now?
Yeah. Well, we have 12. However, our inspectors do hazmat and underground tank inspections. They do them both together. We are looking for Chief Traz's direction to separate that as we look to reorganize the Fire Prevention Bureau.
What's the relationship currently between the California Environmental Protection Agency and the Department of Toxic Substance Control, DTSC?
I'm not sure.
Okay, because I think some of it is within the province of DTSC, and I know they've had quite a bit of turnover in terms of the leadership through the years.
Yeah, I can look into that and report back.
Is it it might be a sub-agency?
Yeah, no, it is a sub-agency. I'm not sure on the relationship and their turnover and so forth.
Thanks.
I think one of the really interesting aspects of the CUPA program, though, is that I'm not sure that it is in the mission of the fire department, because underground tanks that's an environmental hazard.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's pretty different than just about everything else we do, and that's I think that's just an important point for us to be thinking about is this fundamentally located in the right place, and that may be why we're having difficulty with it, and so. I think that's a conversation worth discussing a little further as well when we get to it.
Yeah, I just want to mention, like DTSC, a lot of their preoccupation right now is in the San Fernando Valley at the Santa Susana, where they had the core meltdown that occurred, and that's where they're investing a lot of their energy and everything. So, and I would agree with you. I'm not sure a lot of what EPA is looking for us to do is necessarily within the province, really, of the city fire department.
They also have environmental inspectors. Like we're just inspecting it for fire safety, right? Where are we doing the environmental part also?
There's anything in regards to underground storage tanks, and I've spoken offline to Commissioner Fazio based on his personal business. A multitude of regulatory agencies conduct and inspect facilities like this. We are one piece of that puzzle. And I do want to touch upon, I mentioned the comment of looking into the potential of civilianizing these positions. That does not mean I want to eliminate positions. I would much rather reallocate those positions to the areas of schools where we're desperately needed of inspectors.
Can I don't know if anyone else needs it, but could I have a list of the sites, possible sites, or the sites that you actually inspect that's involved in this process, this inspection?
Absolutely. We would love to.
Because I'm just trying to figure out what it is.
We'd love to take you out and to show you one of these inspections as well, ma'am.
Oh, I'd love to see an inspection. I don't want to go in the tank. I'll stay outside.
You have to go in the tank.
No.
Chief, is it accurate to state that a lot of those would be like, gas stations, some of which have been abandoned,
that's
and
correct.
just kind of, things of that nature that someone just has to go out and see if there was leakage or if they're up to date with
Well, I mean, there's the abandonment component, and then there's actually, if you have a gas station, we have to witness the testing of that.
Right.
And one thing that, as you know, I'm new in the position, but that I uncovered, our current policy was for our inspector to witness the test in its entirety. Talking to the state, they gave us a parameter of you need to do these following items. Our average inspection time in the field is 6 hours currently. The state mandates 2 to 4 hours max. So if we switch just our current internal policy, we should see some productivity increase.
So we have tank time and wall time issues.
That is correct. Any other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We have one public comment from Mr. Frank Lima from UFUC.
Madam President, Frank Lima with United Firefighters of LA City. In regards to the CUPA and the environmental unit, CUPA covers the gas stations, the underground tanks, and hazardous materials businesses. The problem with the current program is that it is not being properly funded, it is severely understaffed, and it's very poorly administered. When I say understaffed, right now there's one Inspector 2. 2 years ago there was 3 Inspector 2s, a 200% increase. 10 years ago there was 5 Inspector 2s. The money pool is in the state and it's mandated to be returned to the program, but the LAFD has been illegally reallocating those funds to other areas. As a result, has not come back to support the program and the potential success of the program. That money needs to come back exactly to that program. The monies are to be used for training of the inspectors in that unit to maintain their state certifications, update equipment, vehicles, and have a civilian, and I want to make this clear, civilian support staff. Okay? This unit is currently operating without a professional CUPA manager, civilian qualified, certified member, and does not even have a chief officer overseeing the section. So let's make an analogy to that. It's just like saying, let's cut the heck out of the field. Oh wait, response times are going up. So let's take this admin position, this admin unit, not have a chief overlooking it, butcher their staff, and then just say, oh well, we need to serve the citizens properly. Well, you need to staff it properly. I know the fire marshal doesn't want to say it, but we need inspectors. We don't need civilians to augment. We need to quit losing our inspector positions. Somebody needs to say it. Whether the fire chief doesn't want to say it or fire marshal doesn't want to say it, I'll say it. We need to fight for these jobs and properly staff it, or of course, like the field, response times will go up and there's nothing we could do about it. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so that was a verbal update. 5G is the report by the independent assessor relative to the audit of the arson counterterrorism section.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
You have before you for your consideration an audit of the arson and counterterrorism section. I'm happy to give you a summary or overview, or we can just go into questions.
Quick summary.
Okay. So first of all, I want to start by acknowledging the hard work and commitment of the arson section. We had many meetings and conversations throughout the process of this audit. The arson and counterterrorism section was created in 1918, and pursuant to the California Penal Code, the members are sworn peace officers authorized to make arrests and carry firearms. They are essentially a law enforcement agency within the fire department. In 2008, at the request of the department, the Los Angeles Police Department conducted an audit of the quality of investigations that the arson section was conducting. And that was presented to the commission, and at the commission's direction, the department created an audit implementation plan that was presented to the commission, last heard in January of 2010, and then as far as we could see, there was no further oversight beyond that date. This audit was conducted for 3 reasons: to assess the status of the implementation of the recommendations from the LAPD audit, to assess the quality of recent investigations by the arson section, and to determine if the members working in the arson section possess the requisite background, qualifications, and firearms training required for the assignment. There were 5 objectives of the audit. The first one was policies and procedures. Following the LAPD audit, the department endeavored to create an arson procedures manual, which was to incorporate what is a comprehensive but pretty outdated operations manual for the arson section, a more current arson procedures bulletin, and the section's clerical procedures. The department reported to us that this is still a work in progress, and our recommendation is that the department continue to formulate that arson procedures manual. Objective number 2 was quality of investigations. We reviewed 48 cases that were cleared by arrest in 2013. We assessed the cases for issues such as evidence preservation, canvassing for witnesses, identification of all witnesses, and interviewing all of the witnesses, supervisory review and whether the department's arson response protocols were followed in those cases. We found that overall the quality of the investigations was good, and we also met with members from the district attorney's office who regularly work with the arson section to discuss some of the findings regarding the investigations, and they had very high praise for the work of the arson section. We did make some recommendations for policies aimed at enhancing investigative practices, and further we found that the department had more than one version of the policy that defines when arson is supposed to be called and when they're supposed to go out to the scene, so we recommend that the department come up with one policy, one procedure, and disseminate that to the members of the department to make sure there's a clear understanding of what the guidelines are. Third, we looked at investigative training. We found that a firefighter wishing to apply for the position of arson investigator trainee is not required to have any previous experience related to arson investigations. And once accepted to the position, the only formal training that's required is the basic peace officer arrest and control and firearms training, and then ongoing firearms training throughout a person's career in the arson section. I do want to emphasize that investigators do voluntarily go through various training courses while they're in the arson section, but there is no formal training program. And so we have recommended that the department implement a formal training curriculum for the arson section. Objective 4 was supervisory oversight. We reviewed the investigations to determine if the arson section's policies were followed related to whether supervisors were notified of arrests, whether they were approving arrest reports, booking approvals, and fire investigation reports. And we made recommendations for enhancing the role of the captains in regard to supervisory oversight. I do want to note that the section had recognized that this was an issue and has already begun implementing protocols for ensuring that reports are approved in the manner according to policy. And fifth, we looked at background investigations and firearms qualifications. We reviewed laws and agreements related to background investigations and psychological evaluations, and we found that the department has not completely complied with the most recent agreement and recommend that they do so as soon as possible. Further, a letter of agreement between the fire department and LAPD requires arson investigators to follow LAPD policies related to firearms qualifications, and we recommended that the fire department implement protocols to ensure compliance with LAPD's policies. Finally, I do want to make a few acknowledgments. I really want to thank the fire department, especially the personnel in the arson and counterterrorism section, for their cooperation and collaboration in the research for this audit. They're very passionate about their work. Battalion Chief Nelson and Captains Camacho and Berkery made a very positive impression upon us, and we commend them for their ongoing efforts. I would also like to thank Senior Investigator Dave Liskey for all his help. Further, the city's personnel department, the district attorney's office, the county sheriff's department, we spoke with them, and personnel at LAPD all assisted us with this audit, and we appreciate their help. And finally, I want to thank Special Investigator 2 Bob Langweber, who is really an invaluable member of our team, and Ms. Gomez, of course, for all of her good work as always. And I'm happy to take any questions.
I act as the liaison to Homeland Security, which this sort of falls under, so I was a little bit involved, and I just want to acknowledge the work of Ms. Stingel and her investigator. Countless amount of hours and discussions and interviews went into the creation of this, and it's very well done. It's not 1,000 pages, so thank you for that. It was done in a,
Leslie, thank you for that.
Yeah, it was done in a very elegant manner that's readable, and I don't always find that to be the case. It's well written and well presented. And I also know from speaking with the leaders in our arson section that they've taken this involvement that you've had in their section very, very seriously. And all the discussions have been, assimilated into action within that section to make, corrections wherever they may be or deficiencies wherever they may be into consideration and jump right on it. unfortunately they're such a small unit, that they don't have people they can resource to a lot of the administrative functions, and I know the chief is working to try and augment that at this point as well in light of what you've written. But it's a great unit with some, as you said, very passionate people that are very professional and generally exceed the standards. Even though they may not be written standards, they generally exceed them insofar as the training that they undertake on their own dime, both in terms of firearms as well as just, a lot of the material that they collect from the state and classes that they go to. In fact, we have a couple of, national experts in our unit that I have actually sat in and audited their class, because they're seen by both police agencies as well as fire agencies as some of the foremost leading experts in the country on some of the investigatory skills that we bring to bear, in the world of arson. So thank you and thank them, and it's a great report with a lot of things that I think are going to give them an action item list that they've already begun to work on. But, want to primarily thank you and Investigator Levwire for all the help that you've done to help, all the work you've done to help us understand what's going on in the unit.
And I think this is the first report by the Office of Independent Assessor that it goes beyond either discipline or litigation, right? So in the history of this office, so I commend you for that because, your oversight role is more than just discipline and litigation. It's all of this stuff. Our oversight role is all of this stuff also. So it was very thorough. It was very well done. But there's a few things that are obviously of concern to me, and one of them is that, there was a 2008 report from the LAPD that found a lot of these discrepancies, and here we are at 2014, and they're still there. So one of the things that I would like to add to your recommendations is that, it keep coming back to the commission because it's not, so obviously like this oversight role needs to be continuing, like more than just coming back every 5 years. In 5 years we can't have another independent assessor do another report telling us that these deficiencies still exist. So, maybe it having an immediate response from the department in like 90 days, and then having it make sure that it comes back to the commission in a year that we reassess what's going on in this unit. I mean, if they're not huge discrepancies, but they're there and they've been lingering for a long time.
My suggestion would be when we get the report back, 9 days sounds good, but just that we have timelines, for the ones that the department agrees with that you're gonna, and we all agree that you're gonna do, that we just have timelines and then we get interim reports. I don't know, it doesn't need to be a year. I mean, maybe sooner than a year, but if there's a timeline.
Well, 90 days, policies and procedures that they're going to be implementing.
Right. So in 90 days we're going to get a response to the report, and you should just give us a timeline by which you think.
And by response we mean like policies and practices that the department's going to adopt in response to this.
Right.
And who oversees when the recommendations are made? Is it the chief that oversees the implementation of those recommendations?
Yes, currently arson reports to Emergency Services Bureau, but we're looking at reorging that to Homeland Security. Chief Mike Little will be the lead on the response to this report. I've read the report. Chief Roy has read the report. I've met with Sue Stengel on this a couple of times. We agree with all the recommendations. We're going to get it done. So in 90 days, we'll tell you the progress to that point.
And then the ongoing progress,
yes.
and timelines for
timeline to complete the whole thing.
Great.
So, and an ongoing basis, Chief Little will be the person that will oversee the department. Is that what you're saying? So that someone is always keeping check.
The person that's in charge of that section will be accountable for maintaining the performance to this audit.
Mm-hmm. I compliment Inspector General on the report myself. I've met some of the arson inspectors, and they are really. I myself was overly impressed with their training and background because I never knew that they had to go through all of that. And they're great chili makers. They won the chili contest.
Get all the good food.
I likewise thought the report was phenomenal, but actually the news reports right after the fire downtown, actually, all the news reports seem to focus on the canines, the dogs that can sniff out the accelerants and everything. And I guess maybe I missed it.
Where are the dogs?
Yeah, where are the dogs? So I mean, we've known about dogs sniffing out bed bugs, but this week was, this past week's first time I learned about dogs sniffing out, accelerants. And for a fire like that, I'm sure, the dogs may play a very important role. And so I was just curious about the canine involvement.
I'll have to defer to the department, although I will say that the dog was present at our first meeting with Chief Nelson.
I believe that's an ATF dog, right, Chief?
It's our dog, Major. Frank Oglesby is the owner of Major. Major lives with Frank. We actually have 3 types of dogs. We have a dog that does accelerant detection. We have a dog that searches for live people. And we have a dog that searches for deceased people.
Oh, wow. I was also impressed because they do have the AFT people who are assigned here in LA to work with them on a regular basis, and so that was interesting to me too.
I had mentioned, and I don't know if it's in the report or not, but I think there are certain things in the department that would be good for us to promote from within a unit, and this would be a example of that, at least in my mind, for people that are kind of coming up through that unit to then ascend into more leadership roles, because at least they would understand this sort of different environment, as you say. It's kind of a law enforcement environment within a fire department, so it's a little bit different in sort of the mindset. And so instead of just promoting a captain from the field right into that unit that may not have had any experience in that, seems to me like this would be an example of a place where maybe we would want to, look at it as more of a career path. And I don't know if that's feasible with the way in which we operate as a department, but it just seems logical to have somebody kind of come up through that system that understands evidence and search and seizure and, all the things that go along inherent with an arson investigation section. I don't know if that was necessarily pointed out in the audit, but just as a commissioner reviewing it, I thought that would be something that would be nice for the department to consider maybe in that area, and there's probably others as well, but that one in particular.
Yeah, because it is a very specialized, position.
No, I agree with that philosophy. If you look at our dispatch center, our fire prevention bureau, arson, ideally you'd want somebody to promote through the ranks. That's contingent upon them having a desire to promote. But if you have that population, that certainly is a big advantage to being a supervisor in the unit that you used to work in. So we're looking at some possibilities of streamlining that and making it more available.
Mm-hmm. Great. Thanks, Chief.
Because I was surprised also that when they told me they are like Commissioner Fazio said, the police within the fire department, because not only do they follow the investigation from the beginning to the end, they go out and arrest people and do the whole gamut. So it's their job is just really, and they were firefighters, and now they're police officers.
And unlike the Coupa thing, I don't think that this is a unit that the department would ever give up, the arson unit. So, yeah, so it needs to be fixed.
Great work.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So the motion, should I have a motion?
Move to receive and file.
Receive and file, and then give.
Approve the report. Move to approve the report, item 5G.
And then also have the department. Oh, that's right. Speaker first, and then we'll have. Yeah, that's right.
I will hold that motion.
So, Mr. Frank Lima from UFLAC.
Thank you, Madam President. Frank Lima with UFLAC, here to make a couple comments on the independent auditor's audit for the arson counterterrorism section. First, I want to thank our independent assessor for reaching out to UFLAC to discuss her report and seek our input. Having UFLAC be a part of the conversation is respectful and very important to us, and we want to publicly thank Mrs. Stengel for having open dialogue with our UFLAC firefighters. Let me also reiterate the sentiments written by our independent assessor, the district attorney's office, and the LAPD. We do, in fact, have great people in our arson unit. They are dedicated professionals who are the best in the business at their respective jobs. With respect to the recommendations of the report, I believe that all the ideas put forth, including new procedures manual, updated policies and protocols, and additional training, all make sense, but only if they are implemented properly, not unilaterally. I ask that this commission and the leaders of our department make a concerted effort to include members of our arson counterterrorism team so that there is no disconnect with any new policies and procedures from what is actually needed in the field on a day-to-day basis. As the independent assessor saw throughout the duration of her audit, our arson personnel are committed to their work, and they want to be a part of any reforms that will make them more efficient. Including them, which is including LUFLAC, in the process will ensure that we are all successful moving forward together. Thank you once again to Sue Stengel, and appreciate us working together.
Thank you. Okay.
Okay.
So.
Any more comments?
No.
All right. So now move to approve the report. That's item 5G.
Second.
And then, but also that the department report back,
In 90 days.
and that the report back include specific policies and procedures that they will be including or adopting.
I accept that amendment.
Okay.
Second it.
All in favor? Aye. Public comment. Mr. Lima. We're at item 6.
Madam President, don't have many comments, but I just wanted to thank this commission, fire chief. We had a lot of good, as the year comes to a close, we've got a lot of good things that we could look proudly on. You know, a lot of cooperation. Appreciate a lot of the members here coming to our UFLAC Christmas party. In addition to that, I just wanted to make something on the record in that the UFLAC office has been used tremendous amount lately by the city with the city administrative officer, with our negotiations, with our stakeholders meetings, and we continue to have that process be open, a process that or a place, another option to have meetings that's so centrally located, and the refreshments are better than anywhere around. But the other day, there was a problem on Friday with power outage at Frank Hodgkins, so all the arson, all the ATF members, everybody working on the Da Vinci fire, they called me, and as we opened up our house to them with refreshments and all, and it's just a good partnership. So thank you, and I hope you all have a great holidays from our firefighters.
Thank you, Frank.
Motion adjourned.
Second. Aye.